You can bet on India when the chips are down. This is what Prime Minister Modi's pitch for the semiconductor companies present at the Semicon India event 2024 was. Now, even though India is a late entrant in the semiconductor space, the government's push underlines the economic and strategic importance of the sector. On the big story this evening, we discuss the reasons for this push and how India can create a place for itself in the chip-making landscape. Good evening. You are watching NDTV Profit and I'm Nupur Talwar Suri. We begin the show with a report from the Semicon India 2024, an event that highlights how important India is preparing itself to become a global competitor in this highly challenging sector.
India and semiconductors. This is a tryst that has been in the making for a while, and now in its second attempt under the third term of this current government is when we're seeing some sort of fruits finally fructifying. It all started about 14, 16 years back when semiconductors really started to become a very prized commodity within Asia. We saw Vietnam step up. We're seeing Malaysia and Singapore step up into the game of semiconductors. India too tried, but then it did not work out at that point in time. There was a lack of vision. You can call it a lack of technical prowess at the time as well. But what we're seeing now is a very definite foray into semiconductors as an industry. What we're seeing from India is an all-round approach. It is also a realization that semiconductors actually touch everything around us, right from the mic I'm speaking into, the phone I'm holding, to the camera that is recording, also the light that is powering. Everything requires chips, everything requires a brain, and that brain is the chip or the semiconductor. And that is the reason why India is finally sort of understanding the value of it and getting into it. Also, the COVID pandemic actually really sort of became the stepping point for a lot of these countries that did not realize the advantage of semiconductors, because when there was a global shortage, a lot of electronics manufacturing was completely stalled. And we also have seen how NVIDIA has grown to its stature being a pure chips company. Moving on to the opportunities that lie, like I said, it is a part of all sorts of electronics, and it's also a part of the life chain of any sort of electronics manufacturing. So if India wants to be a leader in electronics manufacturing, the base has to be set, and that base is semiconductors.
All right, and the Prime Minister spoke at the Semicon India 2024 event. He talked about India's sparkling semiconductor industry and the government's efforts to make the nation a hub for manufacturing chips.
एक पुरानी प्रचलित कहावत रही है, let the chips fall where they may, यानी जो चल रहा है उसे वैसे ही चलने दिया जाए। आज का यंग और एस्पिरेशनल भारत इस भावना पर नहीं चलता। आज भारत का मंत्र है इंक्रीजिंग द नंबर्स ऑफ चिप्स प्रोड्यूस इन इंडिया, और इसलिए हमने सेमीकंडक्टर मैन्युफैक्चरिंग को आगे बढ़ाने के लिए बहुत सारे कदम उठाए हैं। भारत में सेमीकंडक्टर मैन्युफैक्चरिंग फैसिलिटी लगाने के लिए 50% सपोर्ट भारत सरकार दे रही है।
Well, so the big questions that we are asking on the big story this evening: why is India giving a push to semiconductors now? Can India emerge as a global semiconductor hub? And how will India beat Taiwan, South Korea, China and the US in the global semiconductor market? And to answer those questions and many more, we are now joined by Mr. Tarun Pathak. He's Research Director at Counterpoint Research, and also Mr. Pankaj Mahindru. He's the Chairman of the ICEA. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining in.
Thank you. Thank you, Nupur, for having us on the show.
Mr. Mahindru, first to you. Now, obviously, the global chip industry is dominated by a large number of companies, and they are part of a very small club India is a late entrant, but the push from the government is extremely evident. Now, how do you see the current landscape and how do you see India's ambitions?
These are very, very exciting days, from being skeptics, we are becoming extremely optimistic and very excited about this. I think the foundation was laid by this extraordinary growth in mobile phone manufacturing and electronic manufacturing. So crossing 50 billion in mobile phone manufacturing, 100 billion in electronic manufacturing, we are kind of now big boys, we've arrived. The semiconductor work started about just 2.5 years back, and the progress is extraordinary. I mean, 5 projects getting grounded in the face of so much investment globally. Coming back to your specific question on it's a small club. Well, yes and no. We have been able to penetrate to a very large extent because of the credibility. This is something where all the ducks have to be lined up. Outreach, processes, SOPs, custom clearance, how the advanced pricing is done. So it is a whole Team India effort. Of course, with very, very strong leadership from the Prime Minister and from the Minister, Mighty Minister, Ashwini Vaishnav. We have a very, very extraordinary team which is working very passionately. So there is competence, there is passion, there is commitment, and there is we are putting our money where our mouth is. All these factors and state governments, let's not forget the state governments. The state governments are playing a very extraordinary enabling role. And could you imagine that Assam is putting up a packing facility? And Gujarat is having 4 new projects, which is becoming a semiconductor hub of the world now. I think the big boys were watching us. Micron broke the ice. Then the big boy from India invested in the project, in the fab and the packing facility, followed by Renesas and CG and Keynes after that. And there are a number of other projects which are also in the pipeline. This particular Semiconductor Executive Summit yesterday had almost the entire global big boys there. Of course, not all, but global leaders from almost 40 companies were there, and the second tier leaders also from a large number of companies were there. And the exhibition has extraordinary number of companies. So it has been a leap. It has been a leap for us, and faster than we expected.
Right.
So these are good times. I must say these are good times.
And of course, exciting ones that you are very happy to be part of. Now, if I could bring Pankaj, I'll come back to you in a bit. But Tarun, if I could bring you in now. India's move to go deeper into this and develop a semiconductor industry in India is also driven by, strategic imperatives. Of course, there is the economic side of it, but what's your sense on how do we now navigate both the strategic side of it as well as the economics of it? Because strategically, we are likely to see more strained ties between US and China, and that's likely to impact everybody around the globe.
Yes, definitely. I think a very important question. First of all, I agree with Mr. Mahindu completely on it's very exciting times. And I'll say like India is chipping in at the right time. What we are seeing strategically, obviously, after the COVID, the entire geopolitical situation came into picture and everyone was saying, hey, why the entire world is putting eggs in one basket, which is like China. We need to diversify beyond our rely less on one nation. And then there were discussions started happening beyond a particular nations. And then obviously India emerging as the leading one in that space. Obviously, there are a couple of things that needs to be looked into. So strategically, I think we are very well placed. So there are a couple of things that actually are in favor of India right now. If you look at 20% of the global semiconductor workforce is here in India. And if you look at the design perspective, we are even better than some of the even rival nations we are competing. So it's also, there is one word which Honorable Prime Minister mentioned is the aspirational India. I think that is big because if you look at right now from the economic perspective, which is the second part of your question, is if you look at the consumer goods, the integration of semiconductor is increasing. Every consumer electronic good, there's a increasing content of semiconductor which is happening. And if you look at the devices around us, almost there is 1.5x increase in the number of devices that are relying more on the semiconductors around. So which means you as a nation need to be really be dependent on these things. There were times when we were discussing data is the new oil and everything, but we believe for the next decade and the decades after, semiconductor, I think is going to be the most important segment that the nations who think of like self-reliant and everything that we need to achieve, we can't leave this opportunity open for other nations. So I think we are, like I said, chipping in at the right time, and there are a lot of synergies in place. Like I said, global workforce, we already have like almost number 2 in annual STEM graduates globally. We have almost like 600K in terms of graduates that are enrolling in electronic programs. So that are things we have started on a positive note. Like Mr. Mahendra said, very exciting times. And yeah, and I'm coming from Semicon right now, and you look at the excitement on the ground. We have seen more foreign delegates this time, and they were like one gentleman gave a very interesting comment to me, like from the India perspective. They're saying initially a couple of years back, semiconductor used to be very complex thing, but now a lot of you who are talking semiconductors in India are making this discussion very easy. So I think that is also one area that we are understanding the complexity,
right.
but forward in a very easy way.
Absolutely. So as you're saying, Tarun, there's a lot that's working for us. But Pankaj, if I could come back to you, but this is also a very expensive business and one that is very capital intensive. Now, how significant a challenge do you think is this for us, given that, there will be a large number of domestic players who will want to stay away. So what is it that we can do to make it more exciting?
देखिए, हाथी रखने हो तो दरवाजे बड़े करने पड़ते हैं. We have to change our mindset, right? And this is not just another industry. This is very strategic. To put it very simply, semiconductor is the brain. It's like, a body is working without the brain, which is what all mechanical and electrical things were. They were brainless, right? You had a fan which was working like that. Mobile phones always had some brain in it, even the feature phones. But now everything needs a brain, because the smart generation like yours, you want everything smart, and the next generation wants it to be much smarter. They are restless, impatient, and they want things to be smart. They want more value from their products, right? Now, India is known for frugal engineering and frugal outcomes, because we are at $2,500 US. 3.5% of the world GDP is feeding 18% of the people. So we know how to do things better. We just need that catalyst, and this cannot be calculated organically. The ability of India to do very frugal engineering and design. So अभी तो party शुरू हुई है. In the design, we will, when this ecosystem sets up, and what Tarun said, 20% of the workforce of design engineers is in India. Now those people have to form groups, startups, bigger companies have to come in. I'm so excited. L&T is set up a outstanding organization for design, and design captures 40 to 50% of the value in semiconductors. So this is an area where India is going to excel. We need to support that, and the return on investment will be the highest. We may invest maybe just 50 million in a company which can be worth $1 trillion. Let's find out how much was invested in Nvidia and what is the value today. So that great stimulus and that great value creation which is going to come from design is going to set off all these so-called stimulus, subsidies, etc., which we are putting together. Let's not get restless. Let's support this for 10 years. Infrastructure is built for the long term. This will not happen till we have fabs and till we have packing and we have the supply chain. So the whole ecosystem has to be built. We have to remain very humble and very conscious that we are a country of limited capital, and there is an enormous responsibility on us that public money has to be spent in the most frugal manner with the highest return. And I can assure you that the ISM, MIT, and the government of India and the entire community, industry associations, everybody is walking the talk on it. We are very conscious about it. And I think we'll have glorious results. As one of the speakers mentioned, that the center of gravity of semiconductor is going to move to India. It looks very chip on the shoulder type of pun intended remark, but I think it is actually going to happen. And last, Nupur, we have the demographic dividend. Tarun just said that the number of engineers we are producing, we will be the workforce of the world. 50% of the workforce, the new workforce which has to come, and the workforce which has to get replaced is going to come from India. And
as you said,
we have to invest the maximum.
And as you said earlier,
our investments in our education has benefited the Western world a lot, because we lost a lot of this thing. But अब उनकी घर वापसी हो रही है.
And as you said earlier,
Dr. Ranveer Thakur is back. I can give you 10 people, senior people, who have left their glorious lifestyle in the West, in Silicon Valley, having the most luxurious life, and वहाँ पे धुलेरा में वो मिट्टी खा रहे हैं, जिसे बोलते हैं.
And as you said earlier, obviously, we want the labor to go hand in hand with the brains, and we want all of that to work for India. Stay with us. I'm going to quickly play out what Yogi Adityanath, the Chief Minister, has said, just to take forward the point that this is going to be a lot of collaboration that's required between the states, the center, as well as the various other stakeholders. Let's quickly listen in, then we go back to our guests.
उत्तर प्रदेश ने भी इस दिशा में आईटी सेक्टर, सेमीकंडक्टर, डाटा सेंटर, इलेक्ट्रॉनिक मैन्युफैक्चरिंग पर विशेष ध्यान देने और इस दिशा में कुछ नए प्रयास हो सकें, यह कार्य प्रारंभ किया। पिछले कुछ वर्षों के दौरान जो प्रयास उत्तर प्रदेश में प्रारंभ हुए, आज उसका परिणाम है कि देश की मोबाइल मैन्युफैक्चरिंग के 55% का मोबाइल कंपोनेंट के 50% उत्पादन उत्तर प्रदेश में हो रहा है।
All right, Tarun, if I could come to you on this one. Now, one of the things that we are seeing, of course, is a lot of collaboration that is taking place between the center, the state. On the other side, we also need a lot of collaboration to come in terms of research, fabrication capabilities. At this moment, we rely heavily on foreign technology. How do you think we can bridge that gap?
Absolutely. I think of it as more like a foundation, right? So we are building a foundation. So obviously we need a relevant partnership in this space. So one big thing as an observer of the industry, what I've seen changing in the past 3 to 4 years is the relevant partnerships. So you take out like examples like what is happening with Micron, what they are doing, Tata's. The investments are going in a very right direction. Obviously, you will need a global know-how. You will need a tech transfer. And I think what we need to look at here is we need to build a domestic IP so that IP remains here, because unless until that doesn't come here in India, we will be still reliant on foreign players. So I think there will be a collaboration for sure that is going to happen, and there will be a lot of tech transfer know-how that is going to happen between these companies. And mind you, like for example, we need to change the narrative. Like as much as India need these big companies, more than that, these big companies these days are target India. And the reason is why, if you look at, we are the youngest nation in the world. We are the fastest growing consumer electronics market in the world. We are the fastest growing in terms of the revenue, in terms of average selling price of most of the consumer electronics. China is driven by replacement demand. US is flattening out. So where is the next demand that is coming? So that's India. But at the same time, these companies are also looking at India as an export opportunity as well. Apple is exporting more out of India than what they are selling in India. So that's classic example. I think the moment, think of it as more or less a flywheel effect. The moment you start attracting these talents, there will be synergies in place. There will be tech transfer that will happen behind the scenes, and then there is a skill development that will happen. And semiconductor, it's like Ms. Mahindu said, it's not something which is like 1 year or 2 year. Even if these fabs, you look at allocation and the planning, it is 10 years down the line. 2 decades down the line. So yes, that will happen if we start the framework now. Like I said, it's a foundational thing. We need to do the similar kind of foundation in our skill set as well. I think that is going to be very, very important. We do not have a lot of, like, let's say, PhD graduates in that as compared to what we see in countries like Taiwan or so. But then we have the advantage of the youngest nation in the world, and aspirational like workforce. So that is going to change for sure, and it's like a flywheel effect. Like I said, like it will start happening once these couple of companies start expanding their presence in India.
Right. Also, today's event saw Mr. Ashwani Vaishnav. He, of course, talked about the fact that we want to democratize technology, and the government is working towards that. I'm going to play out that comment that came in from Mr. Vaishnav, and then, Tarun, I'll come back to you.
After many attempts, finally, it was under our Prime Minister's visionary leadership that we succeeded in getting the industry to our country. Within the first phase of our mission, in a very short time frame, 5 semiconductor units have been approved. Construction is rapidly under progress in the Micron unit, the Morigaon Tata unit, construction has started, and the other 3 units, construction will start very soon. Permitting, getting all the permissions has happened in a record time frame, which is, if you benchmark it with the rest of the world, this is indeed a new record.
All right. So I'm going to go back to Mr. Mahindru on this one. Mr. Mahindru, one of the things that the Indian government has been actively working on is these bilaterals that they are signing. The Prime Minister was recently in Singapore. He signed an MOU, and Semiconductors, we've had a bilateral between India and the US. So is that the way forward to bridge the time, whatever we have missed so far?
Is a part of the recipe. It's a part of the recipe. This is a industry where everything has to be extremely synchronized, and the bilaterals are a part of this. That technology transfers, institutions like IMEC and technology transfers, bilateral understanding, and all that. This is a part of the ingredient. Ye 12 masale ki chaat, I am very idiomatic today, I must say, but I think this only with every part of the flavor being in the recipe, you can get the final outcome, which is optimal. And we have to strain every nerve to see that, and that is happening. We have Ashwani Vaishnav is an extraordinary minister. He's works like a professional, like a like an entrepreneur, and he's building the industry like that.
All right. Mr. Mahindru, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm going to go back to Tarun on this one. Now, Tarun, one of the things that everybody's thinking about right now is how do we work at the scale that, say, a Taiwan is working at? How do we compete with these global giants, and what is it that we need to do to reach that level?
Right. So I think India is taking a very different approach. So let me clear this. Like, we are not directly competing with Taiwan. Like, so if you look at the TSMC of the world, so there are two things in the semiconductor industry. One is your advanced node, and one is your mature nodes. Like TSMC, like they are building 3 nanometer, 5 nanometer, 7 nanometer. But what you have seen today, what the kind of announcement what Tata has done, they are saying, okay, we'll start with 110 nanometers, 44. 28 nanometers, and we'll start with that. We are not, that's why we say that it's a very like you can say practical phased scaling of the semiconductor push in India, because we all know our limitations and boundaries in a certain sense, and we are not going to say, hey, we are going to create another TSMC in India, because practically that is not possible as of now. But then we are saying, hey, 65% of the electronic components that these require semiconductors that work on the older process nodes, and those older process nodes cuts across different segments, be it like automotive, be it like consumer electronics, defense, and others. We'll start with that, and then we'll scale our journey. We'll look at the know-how. So I think that is what we have taken.
Absolutely. So what you're saying is that we've begun the journey, and we hopefully will be very successful with it. Thank you very much, Tarun, for taking out the time to be with us.
Thank you.
All right. Now, semiconductors, of course, are known as the brain of modern electronics, but understanding that technology can be a bit tricky. So here's an explainer for our viewers.
Semiconductors are materials that can both allow the flow and block the flow of electricity under certain conditions like temperature and magnetic field. They're also called the brain of modern electronics. They're commonly made of elements like silicon and germanium. Depending on the purity of the semiconductor, they can be classified into two types: intrinsic and extrinsic. Intrinsic semiconductors are pure and unadulterated. Their electrical conductivity is low and increases with heat. Extrinsic semiconductors, on the other hand, are doped with impurities to improve their electrical conductivity. This makes them more suitable for electronic devices in everyday life. Now, right from our phones in our pockets to high-end devices used in healthcare, defense, and transport, semiconductors are used everywhere. They are also used in technology related to artificial intelligence and quantum computing. They're literally the life cells of technology. India's semiconductor industry was valued at $34.3 billion in 2023, and it is estimated to cross a valuation of $100 billion by 2033. The industry in our country is segmented into two categories: component and application. By component, we have memory devices, analog IC, MPU, which is memory protection unit, MCU, microcontroller unit, sensors, discrete power devices, and others. By application, we have telecommunication, defense, industrial, consumer electronics, automotive, and others. Now, some major semiconductor players in India are HCL Technologies, Vedanta, Tata Elxsi, Bharat Electronics, and Dixon Technologies, among many others. At the recent Semicon India 2024 event, Prime Minister Narendra Modi highlighted the government's focus on growing the sector furthermore.
Well, that's all we have time for right now on The Big Story. Thank you very much for joining us.